Welcome back to Let's Play Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. Last time we made some pointless backtracking through Brinstar to grab some expansions, grab the grapple beam, and today we're heading off to the wrecked ship. For reasons unexplained, I guess. Again, it's one of those things where you have to pay close attention to like the stuff you go through upon seeing new areas for the first time, and it's like, oh yeah, I should probably reconsider this area for later once I grab an obtainable upgrade for this particular location. And in this case, it was something we saw on the way back from grabbing the power bomb. And again, it's a part of the game I can easily see why people would easily forget at this point. So, yeah, let's go take care of that, shan't we? So, one thing I thought I'd mention while heading back to this area, since, you know, I might as well record the backtracking, because why not? Who needs editing in 2017? I thought I'd bring mention to the upgrades in this game. Like, apart from us having a map in Metroid for the very first time, so I no longer have to, like, consult the guides for looking up where to go, like I did in, Metroid 1 and my first playthrough of Metroid 2, you can also see your upgrades. And aside from, you know, managing your reserve tanks, a lot of fans, for whatever reason, bitch about the fact that you can't, like, turn off and on your upgrades. Because in Super Metroid, like, whenever you gain an upgrade, you can actually, like, take it off entirely and put it back on whenever you'd like. And people bitch about this not being in Fusion and Zero Mission for some reason. Like, I get it. Super Metroid's a great game. It's a standard for the series that's really hard to break past. But for people who still complain about that to this day, I just have to ask, why? Like, what? The only reason I can see people doing something like that is so that for whatever reason you decided, okay, after this point where I need an upgrade, I take off this upgrade, strip my power suit, and start doing a challenge run for this specific portion of the game. Like, that's the only thing I can think of in terms of what good it'll do you for doing something like that. I just don't get it. It's like, people, I don't get what it is with people finding like the stupidest reasons to cover up their nostalgia goggles for games like this. I just don't understand why people will go to such little lengths like that just to kind of like try to defend their game regardless of what flaws it has, without like any like statistical or like good research on the subject for what it might seem like to the majority of people and why it makes good game design or not, you know? Like, that kind of shit always bugged me. Especially, like, shit like in Mega Man 2. Because, you know, I've Let's Played a few Mega Man games where oftentimes or not, like, I'll see people praise games like Mega Man 2, which I think, for example, is an overrated game. If only because of the metal blades. And I just don't fucking get it. Like, what is it with people's infatuation with, like, little features like this that add very little, if not much, to the gameplay, when it could easily be substituted for something in other later entries that could be made up for like a more diverse weapon roster or other like elements of like good level design or something, you know? Like, just the lengths people go to for nostalgia just astounds me sometimes. And I figured I'd bring mention to this topic now, seeing as Super Metroid kind of falls in that category of games, whereas I don't think it deserves to be in that position, but sometimes it can be, given like the intense narcissism people have for this game at times. Like, I get it. I love Super Metroid too. I can definitely see why it can be considered the best game in the series, mostly for a lot of like its versatility and features that don't translate as well into the sequels, and just the amazing level of atmosphere this game has over like its sequels in some sense, and just like the multiple different ways you can play through the game, which adds infinite replayability, I might add. Stuff like that makes a solid game. That stuff like that makes a solid argument for a game that holds well, you know? Not shit like, oh, I like Mega Man 2 the most because it has fucking metal blades. I'm like, shut the fuck up, you retard, with an opinion that barely fucking matters in 2017. Like, get the fuck out of here. Oh. Alright. I know I probably pissed off a lot of people by saying those statements alone, but like I figured I'd just vent that off my chest right here and now in a game that people are more likely to love than hate outside of like people who are new to the series, of course. So yeah. Anywho, back to Super Metroid. So we come over here, put our new grapple beam to use, and I figured I should probably just go to the left and fill up my ammo just real quick in my ship, but I think we're good enough. I don't think it really matters at this point. You know, one thing I've never really seen 2D Metroid games do enough of, now that I think about it, since we're outside on Criteria, is that, you know, aside from the Prime games, you never really see a whole lot of like 2D Metroid games take out place outside, you know? Most of it takes place within like caverns or underground chambers or whatever. And while that's definitely good for exploration and atmosphere, I'd like to see like later 2D Metroid games, especially after Samus Returns, assuming like they actually make like a proper sequel to Fusion, or hell, make a whole nother like sub-series or something. Like make a fucking Fusion 2 for Christ's sake. Like I legitimately thought like when they did the Prime and Fusion thing, a cohesion with each other, like they would both spawn into their own series, you know? And I was kind of disappointed when I found out that they didn't really do that with Fusion. But what I'm trying to say is, I'd like to see more 2D Metroid games take place outside. I'm pretty sure there's a lot you can do with just the kind of like atmosphere from the messages the whole stratosphere holds from. Where am I going with this? Oh my god, this is why I don't drink hard cider before recording sessions normally. Or why I shouldn't, rather. But, like, what I'm trying to get here is, like, if the Prime games can do it well, especially with games like Prime 2, then why not the 2D games, you know? I feel like the 2D games have this more colorful, distinct art style as opposed to the more mute color scheme of like the Prime games, especially Prime T- bleh, Prime 2, which had even more of a focus on atmosphere than either of its predecessors did. But yeah, I watched this wish like never be fulfilled in like any form whatsoever in the future. I don't know. Maybe it could happen. Spoilers, given the finale of Samus Returns, I think they could probably do with like some kind of stormy night, like really well, for like a whole area or something, or how like make it dark and gloomy, like Dark Aether was. Something to kind of elicit more of that feeling of this planet being really uninviting, just like, the beginning of Super Metroid that we saw earlier. Like, the moment we start the game, the the music's kind of like reserved. It's storming. It's darker than it usually is on Zebas. You definitely feel like this place isn't exactly welcoming for people such as myself. Especially seeing that Samus had been through there before, and like, I guess like what they're trying to elicit, going through the remains of Turan and then seeing the space pirates again, is that like they're just kind of out there waiting for Samus to come back, and they're just like absolutely pissed whenever you actually find out that they've been hiding in the shadows this whole time upon seeing them the moment you come out of Old Brinstar. Again, it's just like subtle storytelling elements like this in the narrative that may not seem like much in the whole grand scheme of things, but just like showing it in subtle elements of gameplay. This is what Metroid is all about and why I love this fucking series so much. Like, just the whole world itself like tells the story for you, you know? You don't have to sit there and go through NPCs to learn what happened or any of that shit, you know? Anywho, this is quite possibly the bane of any speedrunner's existence when it comes to speedrunning, which is Phantoon. And that's because Phantoon is a significantly slower main boss than any of the other four. Mostly because, like, the way this boss is designed, you can't actually use super missiles, which I think is a pretty smart, like, pre-measure to take, because they kind of realized that the super missiles were really overpowered. So the best strategy I find to do is basically use either charged spacer beams or missiles as an alternative. I think missiles might be better though, just to get rid of the flames though, because like the moment you shoot the flames, you basically lose your charge. But I don't really need to be telling you that, now do I? Where the hell are you, Phantoon? God dang it. This is probably like the only time in like the entire series I can think of where you actually just straight up go to the main boss before you get to explore the rest of the area. And I think that fits pretty well in tone with the rest of the ship here. Because once you beat Phantoon, power is restored to the place and all. And kind of makes you wonder, like, upon seeing this, like, what kind of damage did Phantoon really do to this place, you know? Because a notion that a lot of like newcomers assume coming into this game, especially if you played Prime before this, and I can imagine why, seeing as Prime is a bit more accessible than Super Metroid these days. Um, the ship we're in actually isn't the prologue area from the beginning of the game, much like the one in Prime 1 was. But actually, I think Sakamoto actually outright confirmed that this was a Chozo vessel. As you guys know, the Chozo have been to numerous different planets, including this SR-388, Talon 4, Elysia, and Prime 3. And it's assumed that this was the starship they came in, and from what's implied, like maybe Phantoon might have been a specimen they brought from another planet and it wreaked havoc or something. It's not really known per se, but again, it's just kind of like one of those things that are left up to interpretation. And that's another reason why the Prime games handle its world building so well, because like, or handles its world building so well rather, because like it just leaves so many elements like that up to the player of what really happened and transpired in the events before this game, you know? And yeah, as you can see here, the wrecked ship is indeed the smallest area in the game. Even smaller than the final area, I would think. Right? Am I right in that statement? If I'm not, please correct me. Because I apologize if that's the case in hindsight. Anywho, the reason I grabbed one of those expansions early on is that apparently there's like spikes littered throughout all of these places that have expansions in them, and little electricity sparkling bits on the floor. And before the ship regains power, like none of that's active. Like you can actually just jump right into the spikes on the way over to that expansion I got earlier, and it won't mean a damn thing because you won't be affected by it whatsoever. I think that's kind of interesting. So if you know the location of that expansion already, by all means go out and grab it right off the get go. Just as a little tip for those who didn't already know. Oh, and I guess I never did talk about the X-ray scope we got earlier, huh? It's a thing that lets you scan different areas to see if there's any hidden paths or breakable blocks, and that's about it. I'm not going to be really using it all too often in this playthrough, simply because, well, I kind of already know the expansion locations by heart, so I'm not going to have to worry about that now too much. Not really. Not at all. Possibly. I don't really know. This whole episode felt like a mess. I apologize. So, next time on Let's Play Super Metroid, because we have a save station right above us, uh, we're going to explore the rest of the wrecked ship and head over to Meridia, which is a area I'm not too fond of exploring. So, thank you guys for watching, and see you guys then.